All right, I think we're gonna get started. Thanks everyone for being here. I'm really excited. This is the second IndieWebCamp we've done in Austin. And thanks everyone. I know some people traveled. Thanks for making it to Austin. Welcome. Hope you have a good time in Austin. We have a live stream going too, so I think we have some people tuned in remotely or in the chat, so welcome everybody. My name is Manson Reese. I'm the founder of Micro.blog, and I'm just gonna talk for a few minutes, kind of introduce the weekend, and talk a little bit about the IndieWeb, kind of introduction to the IndieWeb, before Aaron talks about social readers to kick us off. So, you know, when I kind of rediscovered the IndieWeb as I was working on Micro.blog, it just matched everything I had been thinking about, everything I wanted to build. And the APIs and the principles of IndieWeb were just a really great fit. So before I start, I want to just thank our sponsor, SuperBarNet. That's Tom Brown, who helped organize the event. Review Talent Feedback Systems, Mozilla, Micro.blog, and Okta. Thanks for helping sponsor the event. The code of conduct, we have a code of conduct on the IndieWeb website, and the gist of it is just be respectful to everyone. We're all here trying to be positive, trying to create something new, and if anything comes up or if you have any questions, just contact me or Tom or Tantek, and we'll take care of it. Yeah. So yeah, the code of conduct is online, but yeah, just be respectful and let us know if anything comes up. So why are we here? So many of us just don't want to use Facebook for the rest of our life, is what it comes down to. You know, we've started to notice the problems with massive centralized social networks that just have too much power. And we don't even know if some of these services are really going to stick around. You know, silos come and go, and when they shut down, they take all of our data with us. Links break, and it's really disruptive to the health of the web. So this is a site, this is just some examples of sites that have shut down, and the IndieWeb has been around long enough that there's a page on site deaths, all these sites that have closed, and it's fascinating just to look at all the sites that have kind of come and go. It's a long list, and even the silos that are still around, they're closing off their APIs. So Twitter has been discouraging third-party developers for 5-6 years. Instagram, you can't even really use an API to post a photo. It's really locked down. And Facebook just recently, last year, really shut down major parts of their API. So it's really difficult, and you can't really trust some of these big companies to have any kind of interoperability. But the good news is that we can avoid some of these big centralized networks. It's getting easier. Mastodon is one example, encouraging many smaller social networks. Micro.blog, which is mine, encouraging people to have their own blog and their own domain name. And then, of course, self-hosting, different options with WordPress. Known is really popular in the IndieWeb community. And static blogging engines like Jekyll and Hugo. There's a bunch of options, including just kind of rolling your own blog. And so we can post our own blog and still connect out to the other big social networks like Twitter and Facebook. So this is an example. On the left, this is my blog. I had a couple blog posts yesterday about the IndieWebCamp. And then they were automatically cross-posted over to Twitter so that people that are only on Twitter can still see them. And so this is called Posse in the IndieWeb community. Post on your own site, syndicate elsewhere, and it helps stay connected to the larger community while we're still controlling our own content on site. And there's building blocks for the IndieWeb. I'm just going to mention a few of them, but the idea is that we can write tools to improve our own sites and make it easier for smaller platforms or indie websites to work together. And it allows different software to be written in different languages and still talk to each other. So these three I wanted to highlight. MicroPub is an API for posting to a blog. Microformats is a simple way to add some markup to HTML on your website that describes a little more about what's on the page and allows other programs to read it. And then Web Mentions kind of enables cross-site replies and being able to reply on your own site and notify another site. With Micro.blog, so we have an iOS app and a Mac app, and I started, when I started working on Micro.blog, to just invent my own posting API. That's kind of like the default when you make a service, you just invent your own API. And when I learned more about MicroPub, I just threw out everything I'd been working on and just used MicroPub only. Because if you use a standard like MicroPub, it's a W3C recommendation now, then you get compatibility with other tools. So not only can the Micro.blog apps post to blogs hosted elsewhere, not on Micro.blog, but other tools like Quill or Own Your Gram for photos, or even like specialized tools like Indie Book Club can post to micro.blog through micropub. With microformats and web mentions, they kind of work together. I just want to show a quick example. On the left is the micro.blog Mac app with a timeline, and you have this conversation, and all those replies to Aaron's post in this case, the replies are marked up with microformats, so you can get a little information about the reply, and then it sends a message over to Aaron's site and says, hey, there was a reply. And so on Aaron's site on the right, on his website, those replies from micro.blog are included as comments on his blog. So this separation where we encourage people to have their own blog, and these blogs can talk to one another, is one of the most important principles of the indie web. It's owning your data, having your own site, and that means your own domain name, because if you have your own URL, it can be independent of any hosting platform. It's not tied to one thing, so you can move it if the platform goes away. Some of the other principles is like the user experience is really important. So instead of getting kind of bogged down in the protocols, think about what the user experience for the user is going to be. What are we actually trying to build here? And getting back to the building blocks modularity, not trying to build one big monolithic platform that tries to solve all problems. Focus on smaller problems and have them work together. And build for the long web, longevity. Social networks do come and go. App.net was one of the examples on that previous slide. And there's a lot of these social networks that they'll pop up and everyone gets really excited and they move to the social network and then it kind of doesn't work out and it fades away and then they go back to Twitter, Facebook, and then a new social network comes up and then everyone goes to that. That cycle I just don't think it's useful in the long term. Instead, we could have a permanent solution, which is just post to your own blog at your own domain name. That's something we can do today and we can do 20 years from now. It's something that will outlast all these social networks coming and going. So that's what I've got. I want to quickly show the schedule for today. So Aaron's going to talk about social readers and I think give a demo. And then we're going to have some time if anyone wants to come up, just kind of introduce yourself, show off your website. If you don't have a website, that's fine too. We can talk about maybe what you want to have or improvements you want to make. And then we'll have session planning. We have some sticky notes. We'll kind of organize what we want to get out of the weekend and plan the sessions. And then lunch, and then we'll have sessions, and we'll split up. We'll have this room, and there's another room across the hall that we can use, and that's what that looks like. And so that'll be the afternoon. So thanks again so much for being here, and I'm going to hand it over to Aaron.
All right, good morning, everybody. Hi, I'm Aaron Parecki, and I am going to share a little bit about the state of social readers on the indie web, which is something I've been really excited about for a long time. So we're all very familiar now with the problems of platforms like Facebook, where Facebook gets to choose what you see when you go read the home timeline. Instagram has now decided that again, like they're reordering posts in the feed, and whatever you're following is not necessarily what you're going to be seeing anymore. And same with Twitter. Like Twitter does the suggested tweets, and now like they decided that people who favorite stuff, those tweets should show up in your timeline as well. And like that's not what we want, right? Like these platforms, sure, they're trying to be helpful, but ultimately they're trying to be helpful to them to get us to click more and look at more things. And I'm really tired of that, and I would like to have more control over what I actually read. And when I choose to follow someone's posts, I want to see everything they post. And actually, that's even not always the case, because sometimes when I follow someone, I actually want to see a specific subset of what they post. Sometimes I'm interested in just someone's IndieWeb related posts, or just someone's technology posts, and not their cooking photos. But the point is that it's something that I want to be in control of that, of what I'm reading, and I don't want companies like Facebook and Twitter to decide what I see online. And this is something that we've had blogs for a long time on the internet, and the idea of following someone's blogs has been around for a long time, obviously. But these social silos kind of just took over everything and dominated this space, and people stopped posting as much, and then people stopped developing tools around this, and then we kind of ended up here, right? And on the indie web, we've been making a lot of progress over the last several years about making good tools for creating content and posting content online. But one of the things that's been lacking until about a year ago or so was a good experience for consuming that data and actually reading it. One of the last tools was, Google Reader, and that finally got shut down. And there's still a few RSS readers, but they are all based around this concept of you're only reading. And one of the reasons that things like Twitter and Facebook took off is that they are not read-only. They are read and write. So one of the reasons that Twitter and Facebook took off is that they are read-write. Like when you're reading someone's content, there is a button right there, and you can click, and then you can write back to them, and they will see what you wrote. And that's not something that most of the RSS readers and things in that realm ever did, because it just wasn't really part of the ecosystem. And that's what we really need to bring into this picture to be able to do this with independent blogs and independent websites. And that is where the idea of this social reader comes in. So this is how I now interact with the internet online. I have pretty much stopped going to Facebook. I have stopped visiting twitter.com. I don't use the Twitter apps anymore. Instead, I have all of my friends and feeds and things that I want to read going into my own social reader. And like Twitter and like these new tools, I have buttons where I can interact with the posts. So if I want to go and respond to something, I can click a button, type a reply, and that is, when I click reply, that actually ends up getting posted to my website. And then the post lives on my site. So this reader is really just like an interface. It's not like where the data lives. It's not a service that is hosting content. It's just a way to get stuff into my website and from other people's websites. So then, of course, when I write this post, like Manton was showing, it's a reply to that post on the top, right? So then that person is using micro.blog, and they can see my reply then on their own micro.blog website. So that is sort of the idea of I'm using tools that I want to use, they're using tools they want to use, and we can still all talk to each other. So in this ecosystem, it's been really exciting. So I showed you what my reader looks like. That's one that I developed, but it's also anybody can use it. But then, I don't want to only be stuck using a website for this stuff. I also like using real native apps and on like iOS and Android, and those can often provide a better user experience, especially for some of the deeper integrations on these platforms. I'm using, I wrote a web-based tool for this, but it's great when there's other versions of these tools. So the idea here is that this is actually two different apps, one for iOS, one for Android, written by two different people. And if I go and download these apps, it'll actually connect to the same data. And then I will see the same content that I read on the web presented in these apps, and the same interactions are possible. So when I click reply and type a reply something there, it'll still then post to my website, and everything continues to live in that same world. So that is really powerful, because now there's more options for people, and there's different tools people can choose depending on what kind of device they're using and their preferences of how they want to interact with this stuff. But it's all the same data underneath. There's also a JavaScript-based another web-based tool that is called Together, and this is again the same idea where it's the same data underneath and it's the same feeds that I'm following, but now it's presented differently. And this is pretty cool because there's a nice photo grid where this will pull out all the photo posts of the people I'm following and present them in a nice grid view. And the software I wrote doesn't do that. But now I can go and log into this tool and see all the photos of the people I'm following presented differently, because again, it's the same data underneath. And there's another app called Exter Reader, and this is, again, the same idea. These are all written by different people, but they're all speaking the same language and can all connect to the same data underneath. So, if you just look at these screenshots, they look like just, okay, this is some interesting app, but the thing where it gets interesting is that this is connected under the hood by open protocols, and these are independent websites talking together, and they're all interchangeable. So the feeds that I'm following actually live on a server in a place that's under my control. And when you go and follow feeds, those live in a place under your control. And the apps that you use to connect to those don't actually store those subscriptions, which is a very different model from current RSS readers, where the current RSS readers tend to store those subscriptions, and then you have to worry about moving the subscriptions to another reader, which is usually a pretty drastic change. So this is more like bringing those subscriptions into your own control as well. And So Aperture is the software that I wrote that does that subscription management, and that's the thing that's where I go and like add friends and add feeds I'm following. And I launched this last year and made it open to anybody to actually use. So you can go there and sign up, and it'll walk you through basically like a way to put it onto your website. But there's a bunch of other options now too. Over the last year, it's been really exciting to watch as more people are building more of these servers that do this subscription management. And that's what we really need in order to have a real open ecosystem in this, is not just one software that's doing feed management and feed subscriptions. We need multiple different things put together so that people have more choices, more options, and they can all work slightly differently, and still, as long as they still speak the same protocol. So if you're using WordPress, there's a WordPress plugin that's in development that does this. There's also a WordPress plugin for Aperture, which will just make it work magically. There's a Drupal plugin that's coming along very nicely. It does like all of the IndieWeb stuff as well as this reader aspect of it. And there's a handful of these standalone projects that you can either like install on your own server or sometimes use a hosted version of them. And they're written in different languages, and you can deploy them differently. So you can take your pick and set up one of these servers to read to manage these subscriptions, and then use any of these IndieWeb apps to go and actually interact with that data and interact with them from your own site. So that is a lot of that. That's what's been going on in this world over the last year or so. It's been really fun to watch as from last IndieWeb Summit, where I launched Aperture to the public, to now all of these things existing, and the apps have come a long way since then as well. So yeah, thanks.